Good morning. Like countless others among you, I've watched with alarm as educational institutions have too often become hostile environments where Jewish students are marginalized, silenced, and unsafe, both in the classroom and on the quad. Education is critical to the health and success of any society. Schools are spaces that should foster critical thinking, viewpoint diversity, and mutual respect. But all too frequently, those principles don't apply to Jews and Israel. Like our broader society, schools have become polarized spaces where nuanced understanding and rigorous debate have been replaced with simplistic narratives and echo chambers. Despite well-intentioned efforts to promote inclusivity, those efforts often exclude Jews, leaving Jewish students and faculty feeling unwelcome and intimidated. Launched last year, AJC's Center for Education Advocacy has a bold, multi-tiered approach that is providing a powerful response to these challenges. Our work begins in K-12 spaces and extends through universities, colleges, and graduate schools. We provide sustained, thoughtful, and constructive engagement with administrators and faculty. We empower and train the next generation of Jewish advocates, both at the high school and college levels. We monitor and advocate on education policy issues, and we train parents to be empowered, effective advocates for their children. We're very busy. With all of that in mind, key questions remain. How do we fix this? How can we ensure our educational institutions truly include and protect Jewish students? Today, we are fortunate to be joined by two distinguished leaders who are committed to finding solutions. Colette Coleman is the Vice Provost for Student Affairs at George Washington University. She is a distinguished leader in higher education who has been at the forefront of creating inclusive campus environments. And Dr. Tom Kelly is head of school at Horace Mann, one of the country's most prestigious independent schools, serving students from nursery through 12th grade. Tom is a passionate advocate for building educational communities that prioritize understanding, empathy, and critical dialogue. They are both also alumni of AJC Project Interchange delegations to Israel. Moderating today's discussion is Dr. Laura Shaw-Frank, who directs AJC's Center for Education Advocacy. Together, they will help us understand how schools can intentionally build Jewish inclusive educational communities, communities committed to critical thinking, brave conversations, and genuine empathy. Please join me in welcoming Colette Coleman, Dr. Tom Kelly, and Dr. Laura Shaw-Frank.
Tom and Colette, it's wonderful to be here with both of you. We've spent a lot of time together on multiple continents.
This is true.
I'm just going to dive right in and start with the hard question. What challenges did you face on your campuses in the aftermath of October 7th, and how did you address them? I'm going to start with you, Tom.
As you know firsthand, because we reached out to you for support, once we got our bearing, fear, misinformation, disinformation, the adults now feeling the cancel culture like our kids navigate today, real unsteady, uncharted waters, which was surprising as an educator given the tremendous success the independent schools have had in building inclusive, rich, diverse tapestries of kids. I'm proud to be a leader of a school that, in fact, our Jewish families led the Difference Initiative. In fact, our 54% diverse today is because our Jewish families not only funded the work, they gave up seats for it to occur. But in the midst of the political free-for-all, in the midst of the fear, in the midst of the shock, there was almost a numbness. And I think you had to lean into it the same way you tell our kids to, and you had to believe in your school's mission and vision and your community's ability to figure it out. For us, as you know, we leaned heavily on scholarship because that's what our kids respect.
Colette.
So, oh, that's loud. I think you're aware because we've all been in conversations since October 7th. I think for especially in the college space, it was a very hard time.
Yeah.
I think it was disturbingly hard for our community, and it was a community that you started to see the fissures and the tensions that split people apart. When I think about things that students have advocated for in previous to October 7th, it was almost like a culmination of people coming together for a particular cause. This was the first time that I saw the community completely internally divided and split and broken apart. And that was really challenging to watch, as you know, because we started the work prior to October 7th. We understood that there was a gap in information, understanding of cultures and people, and not just about the complexion of your skin, but really just around your lived experience as a human, right? And so we started that work prior to October 7th. I believe it was the first time I had you come to campus was January, right?
Yes,
it was
that's
January
right.
of 2023, to train all of our staff on what anti-Semitism, what it is, how it looks, how it shows up, what the language is that's used. And we started that work in January. We then engaged again in August during our orientation program. I think that August was the first August that we had our orientation program be mandatory for all incoming first-year students to learn about anti-Semitism. And that was pre-October 7th. I wish that we had time for things to have taken root before October 7th happened. So we started that work with the incoming first-year class of the training, of the education, of the awareness, but we didn't have time for things to really stick, so we didn't get to the upper class levels before October 7th happened. And so we had a campus that was divided.
That's actually a perfect segue to my next question for you, which is about those tough conversations. We at AJC have always been proponents of brave conversations in education spaces. We want students to be able to express themselves openly and be heard with empathy and with curiosity, and also listen to ideas that might make them uncomfortable, because that's an important thing in education. And both of you have sort of been the exemplars of fostering exactly those types of brave conversations in your school spaces, even before October 7th, as we discussed. And I was at GW doing that, and I was also at Horace Mann doing that. So I'm wondering, since both of you have emphasized this so much in your school spaces, if you could share with us why you think courageous conversations are so important in countering anti-Semitism, and then how have you elevated them since October 7th, given the incredible tension that you both expressed existed on your campus? And I'll start with you, Colette.
Yeah. So I think we have to lean in to these courageous conversations, and they're not going to be comfortable for everyone. And I think we have to be willing to ask the hard questions and to say the things that sometimes people don't want to say or feel uncomfortable saying. I think for our when I think about our student population, so this will be we're in our third year now of incoming first-year classes having at least a grounding, a baseline of what anti-Semitism is, right? So we're doing that. So this will be year 3. And I say it takes 4 years to change culture. And so you just have to keep at it, and you got to keep going. You can't just do something for 1 year and then stop, or just because it's the highlight of the moment or in the news at the moment. Like, if you're committed to something, even in the hard times, you got to stay committed to that. So this will be year 3 for us, 1 more year, and we would have had 4 class years of students on campus that have actually started their educational college journey, understanding how hate appears, shows up for all communities, and not just based on the color of your skin, and not just based on what you're have been exposed to. So it's a grounding. So I think we have to keep doing that work. And it's not always the most comfortable thing. And in lieu of all the things that have been happening, that work still has to keep going. So there's that tension space. You know, there are some families that might think we're not doing enough, right? And that might be true. I think we're still figuring that out, and we're still using all the tools and resources available to us, but we're committed to doing this work, and we'll continue to do this work until we start to see the impacts and the results that will come from it. And so that's my deepest desire and goal, but I do think that we have to keep doing it. So this year, and each year we tweak, right? So in the first year, it was like, oh, how do you do this how do
really
you
hard.
get people? You remember that
Yes.
first conversation. Are people going to be like, oh, what are they doing? But we did that, and we've tweaked it every year. And this year, not only will they have the main conversation about what is anti-Semitism, but then we'll be breaking into smaller groups. We're working with Constructive Dialogue Institute this year to do those small group conversations, to take it further, to do the peer-to-peer, because it's one thing to do on a big scale, large scope, but what does it look like when you then go into your residence hall? What does it look like when you're in the dining halls or in, the club sports or the intramural team? How do we get to the core peer-to-peer conversation? And so that's the next level for us.
Yeah.
Tom.
You can't do it in silence.
Yeah.
And I think this is a horrible lesson schools have taught kids since October 7th. We have stood proudly as the minority against all sorts of tragedies. You know, we have a universal declaration against hatred and oppression that lists out the parade of horribles. And I think kids should see that. I think institutions like ours should be comfortable taking a stand. We have a mission, we have a core value. We are private by the nature of being independent. So what's our excuse? We are not fearful of retribution. We can handle a hit to enrollment. We can be over-enrolled. If you don't like us, don't come. We're not the only brass ring in Manhattan. There are other fabulous schools, but we made the decision we weren't going to do it in silence. As you know, we made the decision it wasn't going to be perfect, and I wouldn't want to lead a perfect school. Kids and adults, our legacy has ebbed and flown, rightfully so, by our own mistakes, and why shouldn't this be a moment too? We're certainly not going to not lead out of fear. And you had a comfort of asking for some expertise. You came and led one of our early on courageous conversations where we
With Ari Gordon.
a moment. We had a student leave in tears, and another student in tears over having loved Israel too much in the moment and not aware of the young lady behind her and her lived experience. But as was expected from schools that take the work seriously, the students cleaned it up on their own. The adults were involved, but the students knew at the end to figure this out together. I think, much like my colleague here with the big kids, still kids, and I think we've forgotten that at college, they're still kids. They still need to be taught, they still need to be led, they still need to be guided, and occasionally need to hear they're wrong. But I think the consistency of it. So we have taken much of the work we did with some urgency and somewhat with a little bit of a mess as we figured it out. We're beginning to institutionalize it. So our social media work now in 6th, 7th, and 8th grade will be consistently wrapped around the Middle East as an example of two truths and very malicious disinformation. We're going to use our discussion of Middle Eastern studies back in actual credit-bearing courses in our high school curriculum. We're going to have conversations with parents about interdisciplinary group dialogue and what it means to lean into a conversation, let alone lead it without making it even more incendiary than it began. And we're going to continue to learn and grow, that it is not a perfect science. I am well aware of families who chose not to apply to Horace Mann. Gaslighting I was accused of. I'm an Irish Catholic leading the charge, and I was accused of gaslighting. And you know what? I have a board, and if the 35 trustees at HM don't feel I'm serving the legacy correctly or admirably, they have a right to ask me to move on, and that's okay.
They won't.
Well, I hope so. That's 5 more years. But it's been a privilege to see it live large on campus alongside the other work we do. The colleges have a very nuanced intellectual war to wage, and it's not going to end. I grew up in a community where I knew anti-Semitism was just beneath the surface. You've heard me talk about my time in Scarsdale, where you were encouraged not to wear your Raider, your varsity jacket outside the village. I had the bagel face. I had all sorts of epitaphs when we played other schools. I think I was shocked at how easily people thought it was gone, that in our moment in time, anti-Semitism had been conquered. And then I went to Project Interchange and spoke to incredibly gifted scholars and politicians who thought peace was almost there with Palestine, that we were doing the right things at the kibbutzim, that we were leaning into our discomfort, we were sharing our medical expertise, our entrepreneurial spirit, it's a perfect example of how wrong it can go, how quickly, when misinformation is out there. Not alone. When one group celebrates death, and America and everyone else celebrates life, that's an interesting dynamic to raise kids in today, and that's why I was pretty outspoken, perhaps a tad so, in my community, that it's bullying. And in our community, beyond 6th grade, if you bully, you're expelled. If you're smart enough to be here, you're smart enough to know what bullying is. And the kids got it, which was even more frustrating.
Yeah. I have to say that one of the things we hear a great deal from our higher ed administrators is how important, and I know, Colette, you will be nodding your head vigorously at this, is we can't fix it on campus. We need the K through 12 schools to step up. And that's actually why the Center for Education Advocacy has this arc of working with K through 12 schools and with higher ed. It's so important, and as you've both just explained. So you just mentioned Project Interchange and travel to Israel. You both traveled to Israel. I was lucky enough to be on both of your delegations with you. How did your trip to Israel impact the way you addressed the post-October 7th or even the pre-October 7th situation in your schools? We'll start with you, Tom.
It not only fueled the fire, it straightened the nail. My wife had attended Hebrew U. My wife, who I admire and follow the rules because she volunteered in the IDF as a U.S. citizen. And when I heard that, I thought I will not be arguing with her. My daughter, who had her big day at Robinson's Arch, I knew I have a minor in religious studies. I went to a Jewish college and chose to minor in religions of the world. And I thought I knew. I'm the head of Horace, Mann. I have all these degrees. I grew up, I didn't. And on Project Interchange, I experienced a tapestry of faith and culture and almost humanity, the very essence of who we are, not only united around difference, rallied around fear. And yet to see a functioning society navigate those two mantras, what's our excuse? When stateside we have so many individual freedoms, so many choices, so many places you don't have to be, why are we screaming at each other and sometimes screaming at the wall? So for me, it was an adjusting of what I mean by privilege. It was an adjustment of the rhetoric and the language. It was a reminder, anti-Semitism all through the Holocaust. It was a reminder of what we've done to other races and marginalized. Why is Jewish culture, faith, nationality not part of our difference work? So I had the chance to come back, and I'm encouraging AJC to send teachers. I had a chance to come back and double down, and this year have an administrator in the AJC leadership cohort, because we don't know. We don't know, and we need to know.
Yeah. And I think for me, I raised my eldest child in a predominantly Jewish neighborhood, right? We were the only minority family on the street for 3 blocks in a pretty Orthodox neighborhood as well. So the exposure to lived experiences of others was not something new to me or to our family. We built Sukkot, we did Seders, we did, how you're talking about your Passover dishes and keeping kosher and how you had the separate dishes, like we did all the things, okay? Because we wouldn't be able to have people over if we didn't do all the things.
On behalf of my people, I apologize.
That's so great.
And so I think there was already an exposure there. I think one of the things that I was really taken aback by in the college, in the higher ed landscape is how much the homogeneousness of our communities can keep us from knowing each other.
Oh, yeah.
And so when you have students that have never experienced a Seder or a Shabbat dinner or have any understanding around why you live the way you live, why you eat the way you do, or when there's no exposure to that, right, then that disinformation that you talked about becomes the information that you have. And I noticed that a lot on our college campuses. And so even in working with our Hillel and talking with our students who run our Jewish student organizations, I've been encouraging them to bring others into the fold so that they can be exposed to their lived experience and they can see your humanity and you can see their humanity. And there's an exchange of lived experiences that we have more in common than not. But I do think that is something that has to get tackled. And I'm glad that we're looking at that from the K through 12, but I also think in the college space, it's harder to, when you have information, that's a counter to disinformation, right? Without any kind of lived experiences, you can just take something, someone could say something to me, I'm like, that's not true. Like, no, that's not true, because, I have all of these memories and context to make sense of what is truth. To your point around, especially for the minority community, I think about the African American community, and I think about the civil rights movement. I think about who the people were that were standing there with the leaders on the bridges, making way, willing to stand arm in arm. That's a lost history. I think that's lost somewhere. And so this past fall, we had a Black and Jewish dinner. We worked with the Foundation to Combat Antisemitism to hold this unity dinner with college students from around the DMV, Blacks and Jewish, to kind of talk about that history and to share a little bit of that context, because the TikTok news can sometimes, some things get lost within that trend.
Just a few.
Just a bit. And so I do think that there's a historical context to live on. So what the trip for me did in Israel, it was put in, we talk about the complexity and the nuanceness, right? And I don't think people understand. So it's like a, catchword. You say, oh, it's very complex.
Yeah.
But when you're there and you're experiencing and communicating with people that's their daily lived experiences, it makes a difference. It takes some of the layers off for you to understand that you can have many truths lived together in context, right? And so I think the biggest shame from my perspective of watching what happened post-October 7th was the way that lines got drawn, right? To cut, like, people who are actually together wanting the same thing, somehow that the message got, the message, that the enemy became the wrong enemy, like, and it's, and that was really disheartening.
Yeah. Last question, our lightning round. What do you wish the world knew about your work at GW and at Horace Mann, and what are your goals for the future? Colette.
Ah.
Lightning round, though.
In 7 words.
The clock is telling me I have to wrap up.
Latin.
Okay. What I wish the world knew about so right now, what I think people know about GW is the loudest noise, right? So all of that background foundational work gets lost. They don't know that we are still really building a foundation for present day and the future, right?
Don't believe the sound bites on social media. There's a lot more under.
There's a lot more there, and so what I want the world to know about GW is that we are committed. We're committed to fighting anti-Semitism and hatreds of all kinds on our campus. We're committed to doing that work and to building a foundation that can sustain for the future.
Tom.
You know, when you get to have a 150-year legacy, you have a right and a responsibility to stand for something. And I'm proud of the fact that community matters at HM. And in this moment, we need to remind everyone that within the definition of community is belonging. And belonging is a universal. Hate's a toxic, dead-end subject. But within that belonging, there's a willingness to listen, a willingness to see, a willingness to appreciate, and a willingness and a responsibility to speak the truth. And I think the greatest gift we can give our kids on the way out the door is not only that sense of belonging, but belonging is the change agent for peace, for a great future, for an inclusive world. And that's what we're pushing. We're not selling it. We're giving it away for free if you'd like to come. But I like the fact our kids sometimes say, and they want it on a T-shirt. I said it once at an event, and I thought, geez, that's going to wind up in the Post. I said it at an event once where there was a bullying incident on campus. You know, you come for one of us, you come for all of us. And I want you in this moment to have that mindset when you enter a campus dorm. And look how hurt and hatred tends to go after the weakest, the most unrepresented in the herd, no matter what the topic. I also joke with the kids, we're the Navy SEALs of academia. That's going to wind up in the Post. So please no one repeat that outside of here. But with that comes a sense of loyalty to one another. I just want that loyalty to be anyone in front of you, behind you. I want the legacies to matter. I want the future to register. And I'd be devastated if I heard from a colleague at the college or graduate level if I saw one of our alums locked in a building causing harm, when we know they've got the skills, the written, the spoken, the agency to speak truth to power respectfully. This violence, the nonsense, the breaking of rules, the marginalizing should have no place in the gifts we give our kids on the way out the door.
Tom and Colette, it's been an honor to be in conversation with you, and more, it's been an honor to continue to work with you in the past, and I'm so much looking forward to continuing to work with you in the future. Thank you.
No, thank you too.